Excited to be joined by Bengs, who is running for United States Senate in South Dakota. Now, I really want to just jump right into it. Everyone says, well, we're talking about South Dakota here. Do you really think you could win in a state that's been reliably red for as long as I can remember?
Yeah, it's about 2 decades or so it's been reliably red. So can I win? Well, the polling, two polls, in fact, has showed that against the current incumbent, Senator Mike Rounds, that after the people hear my positive bio and his positive bio and my background, that I end up on the lead. So if I'm able to get my message out, yes, I do think I can win.
Now, tell me a little bit more about your campaign and I guess why you're running. Introduce yourself to folks who have never even heard of Bengs.
Well, that's most people, even in South Dakota. That's the issue, is that most people haven't heard of me. So I grew up a kid in small town Iowa, had a field basically in my backyard. I grew up delivering newspapers, worked in the fields on Sunday, in the summer. My dad was a blue collar union guy in a nearby town. So it was just your small town experience, about 500 people. And when I graduated from high school, last graduating class from my high school before it ceased to exist, I went to the Navy, did my time in the Navy, got out, used the GI Bill, went to college, and then went to law school, went back into the Air Force JAG Corps, thinking I'd do a couple years, ended up spending 2 decades, worked as a military prosecutor, military defense counsel, federal ethics advisor, amongst a variety of other things. And I retired as a lieutenant colonel. The Air Force had taught me, well, they taught me how to teach. They made me a teacher. Mm-hmm. So I taught international law and the law of armed conflict at the Air Force Academy and at the NATO school in Germany. And when I retired, I loved teaching, still do, and got a job teaching criminal justice, homeland security, and government courses at a small state university in South Dakota in the northeast corner, where we raised my daughters with my wife. Now that they're graduated and off to school, we moved to the southwest corner of South Dakota, where I currently live, and I got a job at Wind Cave National Park as a ranger before I decided that I need to kind of do something about what's going on in the country today.
Well, I got to ask you, and I want to poke a little bit at your knowledge about international law of armed conflict, because there's obviously been a lot of news about the United States' role in a potential armed conflict in the Southern Caribbean, in Venezuela. If you're in the United States Senate, that's something that you're going to have to deal with likely for a while now. Today, we learned that President Trump said on a recording that the United States struck a facility in Venezuela without any further detail. Do you believe that the United States is currently at armed conflict, based on what you know and what's known publicly, in the Southern Caribbean?
Okay, the definitive answer is no. And I could run a class, several classes on this. So if you want to talk about the descriptions, I can say, as a matter of international law, we are not. As a matter of constitutional law, we are not.
Okay, so when we strike these boats in the Southern Caribbean and in the Eastern Pacific, I guess what's the remedy here?
The remedy is for Congress to do its job. Congress has the war-making authority definitively in the Constitution, and they are just sitting back going, well, whatever the president wants, and it cannot be that way. That's not the way the system's supposed to work.
Well, what's your response to the Trump administration saying, you know what, legally we can do this because the fentanyl and drugs that are coming in?
They are wrong. And so, again, Congress needs to do its job. The Senate in particular needs to do its job and raise some hell. And they're just not doing it because they are fundamentally cowards in a party system.
Now, if you were in the United States Senate today, would you vote to support any armed conflict in the Southern Caribbean?
No. Okay. No, there's no armed conflict. Essentially, what has happened is that the war on drugs that everybody understood as a metaphor for decades since Nixon created it has been declared it's real. And we all know that what's going on is that it's a seizure, an attempt to seize the oil of Venezuela, which has a huge volume of oil. And the president has explicitly stated that fact. So this is not a valid armed conflict. So we are acting the same as Russia acted in Ukraine.
I got to ask you, so you're running for Senate right now as an independent in South Dakota. Is there a Democrat running in this race? Why aren't you running as a Democrat? Why do you choose to run as an independent?
There's some you want the backstory?
People want to know.
I'll give you the backstory. I registered as an independent when I was 18. I've been non-political the vast majority of my life, spent it in the military. And I was a registered independent until late 2021, when I saw the South Dakota Democratic Party not setting up a legitimate candidate against John Thune, the current majority leader of the United States Senate. So after seeing what happened on January 6, 21, where we had people chanting for the murder of the vice president and hitting law enforcement with poles. I thought something should be done about that, and John Thune wasn't doing it. So I was actually the 2022 Democratic nominee for the United States Senate in South Dakota. And I
Okay.
learned that Chuck Schumer's DSCC does not care about South Dakota. They have written it off, as you noted before. It's a red state.
Hmm.
Why do we care? Everybody should care about these places. And Schumer either doesn't care or doesn't understand. And we can't leave it like that. So I was the 22 Democratic nominee. After the election, I went back and changed back to independent, which I had been, as I said, most of my life. And now my experience in 22 was that people would agree with me when I'd go up and introduce myself. I would literally say, I guarantee that you and I will agree on at least two, but probably three things. Run down the list, boom, 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 get to the end, and they've agreed with me typically on all three. And I say, can I count your vote? And the first words out of their mouth were, so what are you? And when you
Hmm.
say, well, lifelong independent, running as a Democrat, I'll never vote for a Democrat. And that was the end of it. I couldn't put the thing back on the track. So knowing that and seeing what Dan Osborne did in Nebraska, I think the path is if I can just bypass the I'll never vote for a Democrat and just the ideas sell.
Yeah.
People like it. They just don't like the letter behind my name. So
So I got
that's
to
what I'm doing as an independent.
I think that's an interesting point, especially in a state like South Dakota. If you were to be elected in the Senate, would you caucus with Democrats like Angus King does, for
Yeah,
example?
that's kind of a question that kind of annoying, I guess, at a certain point. Like, hey, I'm running to not be on a team. So what team are you going to play for when you get there? And
Right.
what I've been doing, the approach that I've taken this far is that there's a number of us, Dan Osborne in Nebraska, Todd Achilles in Idaho, Ty Pinkins in Mississippi, me in South Dakota. They're running as independents. We're all veterans, by the way. And our plan is to establish an independent conference where we are the power block. So if you get, let's say, all four of us get elected, and then we deny the majority to either party, and if anybody wants to do anything, they have to come to us. And we're all centered around the idea that we need major structural reforms to the system, and the system should work for regular people. So we can then have some power to do it. So who would I caucus with? I'm going to vote for Dan Osborne for leader. And I'm going to make a prediction here as well that I think you will have at least one independent senator from the Midwest, at least
Hmm.
one. Probably Dan Osborne, hopefully me, and maybe Todd, maybe Ty. So yeah,
All right,
that's
Brian
that's the
Bengs,
conference.
thanks so much for joining me this afternoon.
All right, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.